no mistake, my friends, you are living history. And I can't believe they have national talk show hosts, not just one, but multiple ones now, openly saying, don't sign petitions, they'll put you on a list, they'll come get you. Come get me. The war has already begun. It's an info war. The enemy wants to make it physical. Strike me down. I'll become more powerful than you can possibly imagine in the idea. I'm not going to live as a slave, okay? I mean, these globalists are nasty folks. These are eugenicists. They've got a covert war going against us, an undeclared secret war with the chemicals and biologicals in our food and water. We're far gone. We need to get back in their face. All of you people that serve the system, you're victims as well, you fools. We got a breakaway civilization of technocrats that think they're going to be able to take everything over. Man, we're in trouble. Why did large banks, large corporations, and foreign central banks get bailed out in 2008 and the middle class lost their jobs and their homes? Let's continue with this out the rest of this segment. Then coming up after Lew Rockwell and others, I'm gonna play about 5 minutes where he has his summation. And boy, he breaks down that we're under global government, unelected global government run by eugenicists. Let's go ahead and go back to his questions. Here it is.
Without totally destroying the principle of liberty. Why can't people understand that war always destroys wealth and liberty? Why is there so little concern for the executive order that gives the president authority to establish a kill list, including American citizens, of those targeted for assassination? Why is patriotism thought to be blind loyalty to the government and the politicians who run it, rather than loyalty to the principles of liberty and support for the people? Real patriotism is a willingness to challenge the government when it's wrong. Why is it claimed that if people won't or can't take care of their own needs, that people in government are able to do it for them? Why did we ever give the government a safe haven for initiating violence against the people? Why do so many members defend free markets but not civil liberties? Why do so many members defend civil liberties but not free markets? Aren't they the same? Why don't more defend both economic liberty and personal liberty? Why are there not more individuals who seek to intellectually influence others to bring about positive changes, those who seek changes, than those who seek power to force others to obey their commands? Why does the use of religion to support a social gospel and preemptive wars, both of which require authoritarians to use violence or the threat of violence, go unchallenged? Aggression and forced redistribution of wealth has nothing to do with the teachings of the world's great religions. Why do we allow the government and the Federal Reserve to disseminate false information dealing with both economic and foreign policy? Why is democracy held in such high esteem when it's the enemy of the minority and makes all rights relative to the dictates of the majority? Why should anyone be surprised that Congress has no credibility, since there's such a disconnect between what politicians say and what they do? Is there any explanation for all the deception, the unhappiness, the fear of the future, the loss of confidence in our leaders,
yes,
the distrust and the anger and frustration?
Because we're under great evil.
Yes, there is. And there's a way to reverse these attitudes.
When we come back, we are going to have Lew Rockwell on. No, actually, we have Porter Stansbury on to break down what's happening in the economy, then Lew Rockwell. But I will continue with clips from this as well, even when Lew Rockwell's on with us. Here's the deal, folks. We're going into total bondage. It's pre-planned, and Ron Paul talks about that in his speech as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a record audience we can see at Infowars.com and also on the audio streams, so I would imagine it's like that on XM and on our 140-plus AM and FM affiliates right now. I've been really trying to get him on for a while, and he said he had 30 minutes with us today. Whatever he talks about in this short segment, we'll recap in the next. But Porter Stansbury, you know, he predicted they'd go into QE3. They're now starting it. He predicted so much of what was going to happen in the last decade And he is now predicting right now, it's in the mainstream news that they're going to try to push for a third term for Obama in the mass depression they're going to engineer. And so we're going to be looking at that and a lot more and where he sees the future of this country. I'll give you his bio more in the next segment. But Porter, great to have you back with us.
Alex, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I know you create special websites for different projects. What is the best website for people to go to where you have the proof and the information that they're trying to move in this direction?
It's thirdterm1.com. So thirdterm1.com.
Well, we've got that site up on screen for PrisonPlanet.tv viewers. We'll continue to give it out. I want to get into the economy with you, but coming up, what are you going to be able to break down for folks with what's happening dealing with the economy?
Well, from the economy standpoint, I've got some numbers for you on these supposed efforts to cut the spending and things like that. I'll show you there's no way they're going to be able to do it. And in regards to Obama's third term, I'd really like people to see that there's a connection between something that's going on in the oil business and presidential politics.
Continuing as well, QE Unlimited has begun, and they are talking about all these major currencies going down. Will people even notice if the big event accelerates?
I think people are definitely going to notice the fact that their purchasing power is being eliminated by the ongoing inflation that the government refuses to recognize.
The website, folks, if you want to see the breakdown, the video presentation is www.3rdterm1.com. That's the number 3, just the numeral 3, just 3, rdterm1. Thirdterm1.com is the best way for people to find that URL. And I do think we should discuss this, because if we don't discuss the fact that Democratic operatives are in newspapers that you point out in your presentation up on the site, if we don't point out that they're pushing this and that they're trying to float the idea like they did with Schwarzenegger to change the 22nd Amendment so he can run for president, they're going to end up doing it. I mean, he just signed an executive order today and made it secret what his new cybersecurity takeover is. But we know what the bill was. Even CBS News said it's a takeover of the internet, Chinese-style control.
Yeah, well, if you just look and see what he's been doing to win these elections by ramping up the enormous amounts of spending that the government's giving directly to individuals, $750 billion now on welfare programs that go directly to individuals, food stamp rolls that have increased by 50% in his presidency. If you take just those people who get food stamps, that's like 75% of the people that voted for him. So he and the Democratic Party are engineering these election victories, and I don't think it's unreasonable to believe that he could find a way to engineer the repeal of the 22nd Amendment. But even if he doesn't do that, Alex, that doesn't necessarily mean that he won't have a third term. He could have a proxy, and that's one of the things I talk about. He could put up Eric Holder, for example, to be the next president while he actually remains in control of the administration, much like Putin has done in Russia.
Oh, yeah, Putin with Medvedev, and then he came back again. Medvedev, always have trouble pronouncing it. Porter Stansbury, incredible mind, writer, researcher, investment strategist. We'll be right back with him on the other side of this break. Stay with us. I love what wimps the average Democratic Party operative is and their minions and people. I mean, it really is shameful to watch as now 1,300,000 and counting people have signed petitions. All 50 states are about to qualify. Last time I checked, it's like 20 states have now qualified to have to get a White House response because of the number of petitions to secede, but people don't really know. You don't go to the whitehouse.gov to secede. You go to your legislature. I'm not calling for the classical secession. The federal government's been taken over. And so I'm saying have the states get together and organize and say, hold your horses. You're out of control. We want to restore the republic. I mean, the foreign banks brag they've conquered this country, just like they brag they've conquered European nations. And Porter Stansbury predicted all of this. Lew Rockwell's coming up, but they are now threatening people. And he's got an article posted at LewRockwell.com saying, don't do this or you're going to regret it. and they've got their operatives in conservative media saying, don't sign those petitions. It's your right to say we want to secede from this federal thing. Whether it's unsophisticated or not, it's people voicing their concern. So Lou Rockwell is coming up, more Ron Paul's speech where he says world government's taking us over. Porter Stansberry founded Stansberry & Associates Investment Research, a private publishing company based in Baltimore, Maryland in '99. His monthly newsletter, Stansberry Investment Advisory, is one of the biggest in the world. Deals with safe value investments poised to give subscribers years of exceptional returns. Porter oversees a staff of investment analysts whose expertise range from a value investing to insider trading to short, and it just continues. Together, Porter and his research team do exhaustive amounts of real-world independent research. They visited more than 200 companies in order to find the best low-risk investments in the world. And they've got a new special website with a video presentation, www.3rdterm1.com. That's third term one. The numbers are just, single numbers, not spelled out. 3RD term 1. 3RD term 1. And I got to say, yeah, they are floating articles everywhere saying in the news right now, hey, Obama should run for a third term. We're going to get into this, the latest on the economy, QE3, what he sees happening. But first, I got to ask you, Porter, what do you make of them saying you didn't build it, we're going to bankrupt America, we're going to confiscate all semi-automatic rifles and handguns, and Democrats are really saying, hey, let's start arresting people, and you're racist if you don't like world government. I mean, this is even nastier than I thought it would be. This is crazy. I mean, why do you think they're trying to totally take over right now?
I think, I think they believe that they have the votes, that they have the power of the people behind them. And I think if you look at what's going on in our country, they've, this idea of class warfare has really materialized, where you have half of the people that voted for Obama receiving enormous direct federal handouts. The Democratic Party has perfected this machine that buys elections, and they're going to see how far they can take that, because it doesn't look like the Republicans can get organized enough to stop them.
Well, that's because they're part of the same globalist system. Where do you think the power structure is trying to take us, Porter?
Well, just look at, just sort of look what's going around the country. You have the highest amount of dependence on the government in the history of the United States. At the same time, you have the federal government beginning to break apart financially. Let me throw this number out at you, Alex, and you tell me where it leads. Right now, the federal government is spending $55,000 per household in the United States. There are 114 million households, okay? They're spending $55,000 per household on government in the United States right now. The average income per household is only $50,000 in the United States. Does that make any sense? Is there any country in the world that can spend more on government than it earns in income?
It leads towards designed implosion, and the Weekly Standard said it's 61,000, breaking down congressional numbers, but let's just say 55,000 the average welfare household is getting, and they are bringing us into debt servitude. They are deindustrializing the country under Agenda 21. We are being conquered, just like Stalin conquered Ukraine, by turning off the economy. Well,
I just look at the numbers side of things, and I can't find any plausible reason that either party would run the country this way. They're dooming generations of Americans to poverty and dependence, and they're doing it by bribing these ignorant voters who will believe anything they read and will do whatever they have to do to get a free buck.
It's worse than that. More and more Democrats, and then they talk about it on all the shows, Bill Maher talks about it, they say they're going to just arrest us and put us in forced labor camps. I'm not joking. That's in the new Army manuals. I mean, they're going to come literally put us on plantations, Porter, and let big fat government slobs beat our brains out, rape our wives. I mean, that's really I'm not kidding. That's what they want to do.
Well, they're not going to do that to me, Alex. I'm prepared to leave if things turn out like that.
No. But listen, I want listeners to know I'm not joking. They are licking their lips. Misery loves company. They just want to wreck and just decimate everything. I mean, this is what happens in every other country, and look at how decadent we are. Ron Paul talked about it in his farewell speech. He said, we are incredibly immoral and evil. We are run by authoritarian psychopaths. I mean, let me tell you, we cannot underestimate, Porter, how bad it's going to get.
I agree with you completely on the economic side of things, and I thought that Ron Paul's farewell speech was the most poignant political speech I have seen in our country since George Washington's farewell address. That should be mandatory for every American to watch and to listen and to think about. He's the only political leader in the United States who is willing to tell Americans the truth about our government, which is, one, that we're financially bankrupt, and two, that we're morally bankrupt.
America is dead. Basically, Dr. Paul, but we're not physical. We can be resurrected, but we're dead. It's over. We're far gone. By design, we've been conquered, and now we're about to be deindustrialized. Porter, break down what you think Obama's planning from his own operative statements. During the implosion, he'll be the FDR that saves us. Break that down and stay in office.
Well, Alex, I think the one thing that's going on in our country right now that could delay the fiscal implosion is the renaissance in the oil and gas industry in America. It's very powerful, it's very real, and it's going to produce a lot more revenue and a lot more power for politicians. And that is going to, the way I see things, if you look at people who ran for president for 3 terms, it's Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Obama. And they all had certain things in common. They are all populist. They all spent a lot of money on people. And they are, of course, all very progressive. But the other thing they had in common was, in 1901, there was an oil boom from Spindletop. In 1930, there was an oil boom from East Texas. And right now going on in America is the biggest renaissance in oil since 1930. It's the shale boom. And all this oil is producing huge new revenues for the feds, and also enormous power for Obama, because right now it's against the law to export oil. And so he has the ability to grant licenses that could be worth hundreds of billions of dollars to corporations. And, of course, he's going to use that power and all that leverage to propel himself into a 3rd term.
And yesterday, the Commerce Department announced that the United States is now the #1 producer in the world, surpassing Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, most Americans don't realize what's happened over the last 3 or 4 years in the oil fields. There's been a huge renaissance in oil.
I do. Everywhere I drive in Texas, they're drilling.
Yeah, and listen, Alex, that's undeniably bullish for our economy, and it could absolutely sustain our currency for another 5 or 10 years, because this is gonna really impact our trade deficits, and assuming that we begin to export this excess energy, it could really help the balance of trade for our country. But in the process, it's going to make an icon out of Obama, because he's going to take all this money like Chavez did, and he's going to buy more votes and more power with it, which is exactly what Teddy Roosevelt did, and it's exactly what FDR did.
Wow, that's what Lindsey Williams was saying, is that after they imploded the economy, they would bring in all this new oil, and that would buoy things better than the rest of the world, but there'll still be an overall global depression? Or are you saying things will turn around, or you're saying they'll use this as the process of socialization?
I'm saying that this is going to prevent an economic collapse for a certain amount of time. But instead of investing this money wisely to set our country back on a sound footing, they're going to use it to buy more power and more influence. And in the process, of course, they're going to squander this incredible natural resource that we have. And then that's going to put us even further in the hole. No matter how much resource you have, it doesn't matter. I mean, Venezuela is still a poor country, and they have more oil and gas resources than any other place in the world, right? So why can't they get their stuff together? And the answer is because politically, they're using this resource for exactly all the wrong things.
No. 10 years ago, they had power on everywhere. Now the power's out half the time. Folks, you can see the full breakdown of this in an amazing video presentation at 3rdterm1.com. I hope everybody goes there. It's a 3rdterm1.com, just the number 3, and rdterm1.com. We should link to this up at Infowars.com.
And you can also go to 3rd term spelled out. It'll also will work. 3rdterm1.com will also work.
Yeah, I just keep giving it out because I'm worried it's kind of a long URL.
Kind of a tricky URL, but just 3rdterm1.com. Just go there and you'll see the whole presentation.
But again, this will allow them to get more people on welfare, and then it'll be, well, see, Obama did it. It's so sick.
Yeah, well, you know, he's going to take credit for all this stuff, even though, of course, he's been against it the whole time. But it doesn't matter because there's so much money to be made in this. I mean, Alex, you can't imagine how valuable this stuff is. Just think about this for 1 second. The price of WTI oil, that's the price of oil in the United States, is about $85 a barrel. The price of oil anywhere else in the world is about $125 a barrel. That's an enormous spread, okay? And it only costs you a couple dollars a barrel to ship it anywhere you want it.
And it gives you control to drive up or down the market. Wow.
Absolutely. So what's
Stay there. Was an inside job, just like it always is. Porter Stansbury is our guest. We got to get him on for a full hour soon. We got Lou Rockwell coming up, more Ron Paul's historical speech. We've got to get excited. We got to take the states back. We got to have the states get together and say, we're nullifying you. You want to call that secession, whatever. You seceded. You were taken over by the globalist. That's coffin nails to these people. We're going to draft Ron Paul to get that message out because he gave that message out in his speech, and that's coming up. Porter, you're right. Putin, you've got the folks out in Argentina using oil to stay in power. You've got Venezuela with Chavez. And there is an oil boom. We're now numero uno, #1 oil producer in the world. And it's something that cartels can control and that Obama can manipulate. Please continue and how that ties in. What will he do in that third term? I mean, we're talking about dictator Obama pretty much here.
I think it's clear if you look around the world, there's a link between oil and dictatorship. And the reason is, of course, is that oil delivers incredible amounts of wealth. And whoever controls that wealth has all the power. So if you look at the Kirchners in Argentina, there was a husband and then there was a wife, and they've kept control of the government for a decade. Now, could Michelle Obama run in 4 years? I don't see why not. But I personally think it's going to be a stooge. It's going to be an Eric Holder type guy. And that's assuming that he can't just flat out buy his way out of the 22nd Amendment, which I think he'll be able to. And let me give you some facts that you can focus on, okay? This is the things you should watch for. Right now, there are a dozen U.S. companies, 12 U.S. companies, that have filed for a license to export LNG, which is liquefied natural gas. And Alex, I know you're aware that there is a huge glut of natural gas in the United States. The prices of natural gas have fallen so low that the companies are flaring the stuff off rather than bothering to put it through the pipeline.
They're just keeping it in the ground. They got it turned down. Boy, am I aware of that.
Yeah, okay. So there's nothing wrong with us selling this stuff overseas because we're drowning in it, okay? But they can't. Obama has sat on these licenses for over a year. He will not give anyone a license to export the LNG. Why? Well, very simply, no one's paid him enough money yet. They all wanted to see whether he would win this election. Now that he's won the election, he's going to collect. Think about what happened when he gave up his Senate seat in Illinois. Remember the governor there, Blagojevich guy?
Yes.
Remember what he said when the FBI wiretapped? He said, this thing is effing valuable. I'm going to get something for it, right?
Yes.
Well, believe me, these licenses are worth a lot more than a stupid Senate seat. These things are worth tens or hundreds of billions of dollars because the price of natural gas in Japan is $16 an MCF.
It's also a way to cut Russia off from Europe. Russia's playing blackmail with their natural gas. They're going to have those super tankers ship that stuff to Europe.
This stuff is, this energy we have is the most valuable thing in the world's economy. It's valuable politically. It's valuable in terms of the macro politics of the globe, and most importantly, it's powerful politically. It gives him enormous amounts of power in the country. So if he says, "Hey, I'll give you a license as long as you back my third term," what's he going to get?
He's going to get the third term. Wow.
He's going to get the third term. So he's going to buy off the poor with welfare, and he's going to buy off the corporations with energy.
Is there any way to stop this nightmare? Because, I mean, he says he's going to try to ban semi-auto guns. That will start a civil war. And then I guess all the corporations will line up behind him to just take over America as long as they can make some money.
I don't think there's any way to stop this as long as you have the system in place we have, where so few people support so many others. I mean, look, 10% of the people in the United States are paying for 75% of Obama's largesse. Half the people in the country are dependent upon the federal government. 50 million people are getting food stamps. You can, in a democracy, this is just completely destructive because you've bought all the voters. And hey, and Alex, did you know that in the last election, only 51% of the eligible Americans even bothered to vote?
I know. Listen, Porter, I got to have you back up soon for a full hour because you talk about the zombies. It is getting frightening when people, you tell them about all the tyranny, these yuppies and people giggle and laugh. They're so disconnected from reality. They've never had their butt kicked. They've never been in the military. They've never been mugged. They've never gone hungry. They've never worked a day in their life. And they think it's all funny. I have no idea what these idiots are going to think when it all collapses.
Well, they're not going to do very well. I can guarantee you that. And I've thought for a long time what would happen if the food stamps checks wouldn't clear. If there was so much inflation that the food stamps wouldn't buy you food anymore, what would happen to an urban setting like Baltimore, or what would happen in Houston? And I think those people who are ignoring these fiscal problems and who are ignoring what's happened to the morality of our country are going to be in for a rude awakening one day. Absolutely.
The Ron Paul speech, parts of it's coming up, is just off the charts. We're going to be playing it all over the next week here, and it's posted at Infowars.com. Go to the website, 3rdterm1.com, to see the powerful video presentation, thirdterm1.com. All right, we're going to be playing excerpts throughout the nightly news tonight, tomorrow, the Sunday show. I want to play about a 3-4 minute clip before we get Lew Rockwell on to talk about the secession movement and the threats that are flying from the feds and their cohorts who want to have a military conflict with the American people. The socialists on their sites are, it's time to arrest them. It's time to go in with the militias. We'll take everything they've got and redistribute it. And these are all like these little spindly-necked wimps who couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. You dirty little commies, go ahead and try to start a fight and see what happens to you. You make me want to throw up how you work for the foreign banks and every 3 shillings the New World Order gets, you get 1. I mean, it's disgusting how you've sold everything out and your socialism and your fake moral high ground and the rest of it. It's just unbelievable what parasites you are. But I want to play Ron Paul here in his summation from his speech because he talks about world government and how we're under world government now commanding our military. And then we'll go to Lew Rockwell of LewRockwell.com. Here is Ron Paul's conclusion to the 49-minute powerhouse speech that's up at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Here it is.
In conclusion, what are the greatest dangers that the American people face today that impede the goal of a free society? There are 5. The continuous attack on our civil liberties, which threaten the rule of law and our ability to resist the onrush of tyranny. Number 2, violent anti-Americanism that has engulfed the world. Because the phenomenon of blowback is not understood or denied, our foreign policy is destined to keep us involved in many wars that we have no business being in. National bankruptcy and a greater threat to our national security will result. Number 3, the ease in which we go to war without a declaration by Congress, but accepting international authority from the UN or NATO, even for preemptive wars, otherwise known as aggression. A financial political crisis as a Number 4, a financial political crisis as a consequence of excessive debt, unfunded liabilities, spending, bailouts, and gross discrepancy in wealth distribution going from the middle class to the rich. The danger of central economic planning by the Federal Reserve must be understood. World government taking over local and U.S. sovereignty by getting involved in the issues of war, welfare, trade, banking, a world currency, taxes, property, ownership, and private ownership of guns must be addressed. Happily, there's an answer for these very dangerous trends. What a wonderful world it would be if everyone accepted the simple moral premise of rejecting all acts of aggression. The retort to such a suggestion is always, it's too simplistic, too idealistic, impractical, naive, utopian, dangerous, and unrealistic to strive for such an ideal. The answer to that is that for thousands of years, the acceptance of government force to rule over the people at the sacrifice of liberty was considered moral and the only available option for achieving peace and prosperity. What could be more utopian than that myth? Considering the results, especially looking at the state-sponsored killing by nearly every government during the 20th century, estimated to be in the hundreds of millions of people, it's time to reconsider this grant of authority to the state. No good has ever come from granting monopoly power to the state to use aggression.
We are going to air all of this on the Sunday radio show over 2 hours. I'm going to be there playing 5-minute clips, commenting. It is the greatest political speech that I've ever seen because it's not political. It's about reality. Ron Paul is calling for a return of reality and sanity, and I've never been more proud to know Ron Paul. I've never been more proud to know he's right, and historically that collectivism, despite all its promises, is a nightmare. And how he indicted the mega banks taking us over, the world government, the preparations for mass arrest. He laid it out and said, folks, we have psychopathic authoritarians. These are quotes. I mean, this is the speech that I would like to write, because I'm always wanting to do a whole film just breaking down the continuum of it. And he's done it. And I have announced, that's why today I had an epiphany last night. I knew the states' right movement was what the globalists were preparing for because they know it's the constitutional remedy. They're spinning secession like it's the Civil War and racist and saying there's going to be violence and that Obama needs to ride in like Lincoln and arrest people. This is petitions at the White House now. I mean, I've got them right here where they say arrest us, all this. This isn't even what I'd call secession. It's the states saying the federal government sold out to foreign corporate interests, the globalists, world government, now commanding our military, NATO. They brag in the newspaper, we've been conquered by foreign banks. We've got to have Ron Paul go out with that message with Campaign for Liberty that knows where all the patriots are at. Have competing ideas for a reissuance of the original Declaration of Independence with a battle plan to say, you're illegitimate, Federal Reserve, you've hijacked the country, you've now got governing power under the Dodd-Frank bill. I mean, we're in trouble. And we repudiate this. And what it is it's a platform to challenge them, and then people see legitimacy in government. So through the states, even though they're more legitimate than the feds, they're still a problem. We can literally beat these people. It's the best platform. It needs to be led by Ron Paul, as I said in the first hour, Lew Rockwell, Edwin Vieira, Bruce Fein, and other constitutional lawyers, and men of true integrity. Okay? There's some women out there that have fought tyranny with integrity. I'm not even saying I'm in this rodeo, but I've rung the bell, and I know this is the battle plan, and this is the way to go. We have to offensively, because there's a hunger. Now it's 1.3 million signatures. All 50 states are about to qualify for a White House response. Sure, you don't go to the government, the feds, and say, give up your power. But it's tacking the articles on the door. It's letting them know. It's a Declaration of Independence by the people that we're not going to be slaves under socialism for the blue states all sucking their thumbs. And we don't want the Republican governors either telling us go along who are squealing. But again, they're going to spin this. We're going to Lew Rockwell. I don't know what his take is going to be on this, but I think it'll be with me because it's constitutional, it's historical, it's a reissuance of the Declaration of Independence, it's a re-upload of that, but the feds have been seized by globalists. It's totally special interest. As Ron Paul said, we have to start with states that have enough moral people and enough producers left to stand up and say, I'm not a slave, it's the new civil rights movement, it's the real civil rights movement. We are going to have the states stand up with petitions at the legislature, legislatures voting to say full annulment, we do not recognize you anymore. We are America, we are the republic, so not even secession. It's pulling out of the occupied federal government to reestablish the republic. Now, again, we have to get our own petitions, not that they matter at the federal level, except in the image. The whole world's a stage, each of us players upon it. It's a real stage with life and death, but it's how you present it. And so we need Lew Rockwell to come up with ideas. Ron Paul must put on the mantle, as constitutional lawyer Vieira said, who advises Paul. He totally agreed with my plan. We must launch it now. The flood has come. We must surf this thing, or it's over. They're going to start a civil war. Okay, they're coming for you. The authoritarians know time's running out. Lou, I got you on, and I'm ranting here. I'm so excited because a few times in my life, things have crystallized. And I know when I'm right. I know when I've done the historical research, and I know when the zeitgeist is there. And I have never, this is 10 times the electricity I've ever felt. Lew Rockwell, what do you say to what I've just laid out here? All I'm laying out is what our country was founded on. Can we rediscover the republic? Can it rise again? Will you help us get Ron Paul to lead this exploratory movement to really get aggressive?
Well, certainly, Alex, Ron Paul is the leader, as we saw in this, fantastic farewell to Congress speech, one of the great speeches of all of American history. He is the leader. He's going to continue to be the leader. I would say he's going to be a more effective leader now that he's out of electoral politics. He's got many wonderful things in store for us, plans that he can't disclose quite yet, but after the first of the year, when he's no longer in Congress, just wait for it. There's going to be great stuff ahead. But this principle of, I hate to quote Woodrow Wilson, he referred to it as self-determination, principle of secession. Ludwig von Mises famously said more than 100 years ago that no people or part of a people shall be held in a political allegiance or alliance to which it's opposed. It's wrong. This is, in fact, an ancient Catholic principle. It goes back to the Middle Ages of decentralization, that certain things should be handled at the level of the individual, others at the level of the family, others at the level of the local community. And you do not have the higher governments in society controlling the lower. You have it just the reverse. So this policy of decentralization, of secession, is absolutely a key principle of human liberty. Jefferson talked about it. He talked about the worst thing that could happen to this country is we'd get a consolidated government, a centralized government. But it's one of the bad things about government, many bad things about government. One of the bad things about government is they all get together to increase centralization. Hans Hoppe has pointed out why this is in their interest, so that you have, whether it's what's happening in the EU, individual countries conglomerating together to make a unified state in Europe, or at least that's what they want. It's already happened in this country. We've had state and local authority, needless to say, individual authority and other sorts of private authority wiped out or crushed by the federal government as it's become more and more of a centralized state. And these people, of course, all want a world government. They want, they want a North American Union. They want a world government, just the sort of horror that John Maynard Keynes used to campaign for, and every other terrible political person, maybe in the history of the human race. I'm sure the Pharaoh wanted to be head of the world too. So all these guys want this, but on the other side of power, glory for the state, conglomeration, centralization, stepping on other people, killing, mass spying, all the wonderful things the government does to us and to people in other countries. There is the opposing moral force, whether we call it secession, decentralization, and I would argue, as Hans Hoppe and others have pointed out, this really should go down to the individual level. We should be able to secede as individuals. Alex, like you, I never signed the U.S. Constitution. This, of course, was a point that Lysander Spooner made in the middle of the 19th century. We didn't agree to this. This is something that's imposed on us. So the government imposes its view on us, whether they call it the Constitution or, and of course, as Ron Paul pointed out in his speech, the Constitution has failed. The Constitution did not work. So we need to concentrate more on what's wrong with the government. We can't count on the government to save us. We can't use these government documents thinking that they're going to save us from the government. The government uses them against us. Now, I would agree with you that the Declaration of Independence, which is a declaration of secession, is maybe something we can very much count on rhetorically and its principles. But we always have to remember too, and Ron Paul has pointed this out just recently, America, if we think of the current American system, was founded by the secession of the 13 colonies, which were 13 little independent countries. And too bad we don't still have that system. But anyway, the 13 independent colonies seceded from Britain. This is a war of secession. It was not a war of conquest. The typical war, if we think of the kinds of wars the U.S. wages, so it was a war of conquest. The war that the Americans waged was to get out from under Britain. They didn't want to invade London and try to rule Scotland or Wales or whatever. They just wanted nothing to do with England in terms of political control. So, that's the way many of us feel about Washington, D.C. We feel it about for that matter, our own state capitals, maybe even our local towns. They're all becoming tyrannical. Government at all levels is becoming more tyrannical by the day. Maybe that'll help us understand that government is not the answer. On the other hand, Jefferson pointed out that competitive sovereignties could help restrain government. And of course, it was the abolition of the states as competitive sovereignties to the federal government and the abolition of entities within the states also helped the centralization process. Jefferson said that people who had his sorts of political views stood with the states against the general government, stood with the towns against the states, stood with the wards against the towns, stood with the individual against everything. So that's the way to think of it. We want more decentralization, more power downwards. We don't want centralization. We don't, let alone, of course, we don't want world government or anything like it. We don't want a huge conglomerated nation state like the U.S., which is too big to be free.
Yes, sir.
You
What
can't
I'm
have
saying,
330 million people under one gigantic government and think you're going to have freedom. You don't have freedom. You have tyranny, which, of course, is what we've got.
absolutely. Lou Rockwell's our guest. I'm sure you know, because we actually have an article off LouRockwell.com. Glenn Beck has told his listeners, and I don't want to get into a bashing thing with him. It may just be pure, fear or whatever. Well, I mean, my point is he's saying, don't you dare sign that. You'll be a traitor. I have his quote in the video here. And then we get emails. I know you're getting them. We've got an example right here, anti-secession threat, where it's like, I strongly suggest you do not sign this petition or align yourself with any group that would place your allegiance to the country in question. How about our country got taken over by globalists who bragged that they've conquered America on CNBC and the Associated Press, banking cartels that literally take my money and give it to them while they debase the rest of the money. And then they're saying it's racist. The new civil war is about to begin. Obama will be the new Lincoln. They've been getting ready for this forever. I mean, these people are truly sick. They have petitions signed to arrest us and to have federal militias come in and retake the states with volunteer Democrats who want to run around in little Soviet uniforms. They're dreaming of some Soviet... I mean, these people are sick. These people...
Alex, I can remember when Glenn Beck said that Ron Paul supporters were potential terrorists, should all be investigated by the Army and potentially arrested by the Army.
Yeah, no, he called me a piece of garbage 2 days ago.
What is the concept of treason? I mean, that actually would argue that the government owns us, that we, even though they do nothing for us, they of course do plenty to us, that they own us and we're not allowed to get out from under them. And of course, the government in the American past has killed people for wanting to get out from under it. So we always have to be aware that they are violence incorporated. On the other hand, we don't need violence. We have the right ideas on our side, the ideas of freedom, the ideas of self-determination. Who is Barack Obama or Mitt Romney or Mitt Romney's assistant, Glenn Beck, to tell the average American family that the feds in Washington should be should be supervising them as to how they raise their children, should be supervising their home, supervising their neighborhood, supervising their business? I mean, that's just, of course, pure tyranny. And again, we need a much smaller country. It would be a great thing to break up the U.S., just like it'd be a great thing to break up the European Union. If we look back to the wonderful example of Germany, Hans Hoppe points out, in pre-Treaty of Westphalia days, there were 700 little countries that made up Germany. They all were Germans. They were culturally and linguistically Germans, but they had a tiny government.
And it created competition between those and firewalls to tyranny.
No, this is the way it's supposed to be. This was the way it was in the Middle Ages, when you just have tiny countries. So we've had this terrible tendency by politicians to try to conglomerate together, the better to rip us off, the better to rule us, the better to put their boot on our neck. That's what they live for. They love, and of course, the better to wage wars, the better to take all our money through taxation, better to control every aspect of our lives.
Lou Rockwell, stay there. I want to talk about how we take the republic back. We'll be right back. Again, we have a global corporate banking cartel that's gotten our government to sign on to all of its fraud. They've got a giant horde of people who don't even know how to tie their shoelaces, who are totally domesticated, calling for anybody who works his head in total class warfare envy. We've seen this happen hundreds of times the last 1,000 years or so. We are in deep trouble. This country has cancer. All I say is we can debate smaller units later. The states are what could deliver that under the Constitution. We got to kick the globalists out of Washington and then reconstitute the republic if that's what the states chose. All I know is I want the foreign occupying force out. And Lou, I don't want to just move around and try to get people elected to Congress. I think it's now time to go to the states and say, hey, you want to secede or you want to develop a plan to have a new Declaration of Independence to kick the globalists out? Because the globalists, I know you've seen this in the news, they're bragging they've conquered our country. And I think that's pretty important that all these big mega banks and you know, CNBC and the Associated Press tell us we're now run by foreign banks, but that's a good thing. They know best. Yes, global government's here, but the ADL says you're a terrorist if you say there's a world government. You know, it's time to just go all the way here. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it is, you know, I think our ideas are winning. This is what bothers the opposition. And I think it's wonderful that if a state wants to, for example, seek to use gold and silver as money internally, or all those other kinds of things, get rid of federal regulations, nullify federal regulations. I remember the great moment when South Carolina, to oppose the rotten tariffs of Andrew Jackson, this had nothing to do with slavery, by the way, despite the propaganda. They said, if you try to raise taxes to the extent you're going to destroy us, if you try to do that, we're not going to go along. And if any federal officials come into our state to try to enforce this taxation, we're going to arrest them. So that was the first great nullification. And as Jefferson, Tom Woods has a great book on nullification. If you're interested in this topic, everybody, take a look at Tom's book.
And the power to tax is the power to destroy. We are being destroyed. We are being physically attacked financially by these people. Here's what I'm saying. I know the energy's there. If Ron Paul steps up and says he's going to lead a movement, I know they're going to, for internet freedom, because they put out a questionnaire to Campaign for Liberty people. I looked at it and I said internet was important, so he's going with what his constituents of liberty have pushed for. But I think it's important to codify and go, look, this nullification is going to happen. Campaign for Liberty's got to get out front. Lou Rockwell's got to get out front. You've been out front. But say, hey, you know, this isn't what you say secession is. This is reconstituting the republic, kicking the globalist out, kicking the Federal Reserve out. I think we can rout these people. I'm telling you, there's a real revolutionary fervor there, Lou, and I think it's time to launch.
Well, Alex, we've got the truth on our side. And the truth is that we all have the right to be free. We're all born free until governments, of course, try to make us unfree. And this, again, as you've pointed out, this is a very ancient battle between freedom and the state. So secession is part of it. Self-determination, we have the right to that. They don't have the right to control us against our will. And we have the right ideas on our side. And we have to remember, you know, even the government is aggression, concentrated aggression. The freedom movement is non-aggression. So we're about voluntary association,
sure,
voluntary actions, and spreading the ideas. And more people are on our side, more and more young people.
Sure, what I'm saying is let's escalate it. He's going to be leading
this movement. He's going to be leading this movement.
Good.
He already is leading it, but he's going to continue to lead it.
Well, I know you talked to him quite often and got him on the show last week, and I'm glad that he's also taken over Campaign for Liberty and is reaffirming everything in there. Can you do 5 more minutes with us in Overdrive?
Sure.
Okay, because I want to just have you make some final points. I know I'm running over you. It's just we need to do this now. I mean, all I'm saying is the nullification movement's out there, the secession movement's out there, but they're going to go and point at hillbillies that are announcing themselves president of Texas or whatever. We need to have Ron Paul out front saying, no, we're kicking the globalist out. We're restoring the republic from the states on up, the states that made the federal government. Ladies and gentlemen, final segment with Lou Rockwell on the Nightly News tonight. Myself and Sha'Carri Jackson are going to be playing excerpts of the speech, analyzing it, and I'm here, you know, getting the real patriots on. Edwin Vieira, Lou Rockwell, Bruce Fein, we're going to get him on, the leader of and the founder, another constitutional lawyer, and Ron Paul, former staffer. We're going to get you know, all the founder, Stuart Rhodes of Oath Keepers on, and I'm just saying, look, let's not just talk about move for nullification, states' rights. Let's do it. Let's if Ron Paul stands up and says, okay, you know, the states have a right to tell the federal government they become a foreign enemy. I mean, just bring it up. It's what it is. Call it like it is. He said it in his speech. We're being taken over by global government. And this isn't even secession. This is reconstituting the republic. No one's going to be able to argue with that or call it racist or all their garbage. And just move forward and do it. Just do it. And it's time to get on the offense. I'm ready. Lew Rockwell, we got 4 minutes left. You've got the floor. Again, I'm just putting out the ideas there. I know they're already there, but do you agree, accelerate it? And can you get in there as one of the main leaders of this and work with Ron Paul? Because I'm telling you, the zeitgeist is now. We've got to strike while the iron's hot.
Alex, this is the attitude we all have to have. First of all, this is how we start. If we're walking along the street and some guy comes up and shoves a gun in your rib and says, give me your wallet. Maybe you're going to give him your wallet, but you're not going to give him your consent. You're going to realize you were robbed. That's the government. So you don't say, oh, thank you, sir, for protecting the public good and the common defense and everything by taking my money. Too many Americans have that attitude towards the government. The government is our enemy. It's a parasite. It's not doing us any good. It's doing us immense harm. It's doing immense harm to the whole world. The U.S. government, the biggest, richest, most powerful government ever to exist. So first of all, we have to have, you know, the attitude that God created us free, and the government is in effect serving Satan by taking away our freedom.
Yes.
So we have, you know, that's the nature of the struggle. Again, you have to know something about economics. You have to know something about American history. You have to know something about political philosophy and libertarianism and so forth to arm yourself intellectually, help arm other people intellectually. This has to be an intellectual fight because they've got most of the guns, they've got the tanks, they've got the atomic bombs. We can't fight them that way.
And they used our energy and our smarts. They used our energy and our smarts to build it.
Well, yeah, that's right. But we are the majority. The people who are the ripped off are far more of us than the rippers off. So we can fight them. First, refuse to give them consent. Educate yourself. Talk to your neighbors. Stir up trouble in an intellectual sense by telling people the truth of the situation. Pay no attention to, you know, the networks or the big newspapers. They're all, of course, just liars.
And they're all imploding. And Ron Paul called them state-run media. It's time to just come out with it.
Of course. They always use that phrase when talking about foreign media. But of course, these ABC and NBC and CBS, New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, it's so great to see all these people going down, of course. But they are the state-run media. They're in bed with the CIA. As the church hearings showed way back in the middle of the 1970s, the forgotten church hearings, the AP, New York Times, Washington Post, all these organs are in bed with the CIA and are engaged in propagandizing and lying to us. So just ignore them. Learn from people on the internet like you, Alex. Pay no attention to the official media except maybe to laugh at them, or maybe use it as a stimulus to get angry at them.
Declare them the enemy.
I like shouting at the TV set myself when I'm watching these things.
Exactly.
When I'm watching the news. So, you know, but just don't be fooled and learn some economics. The government is wrecking the country. It's wrecking our society. The big banks, of course, are doing very well, and the military-industrial complex, the other people who are ripping us off. But most of us are being harmed by the government, are being harmed by this agency that tells us that they're superior to us, that they can use their laws to hurt us, but their laws don't apply to them.
Absolutely.
They're
In
above the
closing,
law. You know what? They're not above the law. The moral law applies to them just as much as it does to us. Just because you're in a government suit like Mr. Petraeus with all those Boy Scout medals on his chest doesn't mean that he's better than you are. In fact, you can know he's worse than you are.
LewRockwell.com. We salute you, Lew. God bless you.
Thank you, Alex.